One of the questions people ask me is, how long should my book be? So in terms of nonfiction or fiction, I'm going to talk a little bit about the average length of the books depending on genre, and also some different forms of publishing that have different lengths, like serialization. So to start off, an average book is about 70,000 words. So to figure out how many pages that is, the average page, once it's formatted, has about 350 words, so you can divide that by pages. Generally, books have 300 to 400 pages. Not necessarily, but so on average, for a normal book, you want to shoot for about 70,000 words. That's kind of a good guideline. However, some genres tend to be longer, like a lot of sci-fi and high fantasy especially could be 120,000 words. Some of my young adult fiction is like 150,000 words, which is on the one hand too long. Like a traditional publisher wouldn't publish that book because they would say it's just too long. However, because I earn money from Kindle page reads, I tend to earn more with longer books. On the other hand, that also means I have less product. So when I put out a 150,000 word book, that's only one book, and then I don't really have a funnel to bring readers through the series. So my friends who make a lot more money tend to write shorter books of 50 or 60K so that they can launch faster. So I could break my books up into pieces and have book one be 50 or 60K and on a cliffhanger, and that could be the start of the next book. So cliffhangers are kind of tricky because generally you want the book to wrap up in a satisfactory way, even if it's a series. However, there's a lot of self-published books that end on cliffhangers and they become massive series of like 7 books or even 20 books, just crazy long series. And they sell really, really well because each one is a great story that ends on a cliffhanger that doesn't totally wrap up the story. But it's enough that readers are hooked and they want to buy the next one. I've found that readers say they don't like cliffhangers, and they especially hate like buying book one and then having to buy book two to get more of the story. But a lot of it's positioning and how you describe it. I made the mistake of saying this is part one of the book, and I'm going to break it and split it into part two of the same book and have 70,000 words of each part. And readers were unhappy because they didn't like how I was splitting up the book. So I've had some comments or some reviews how like they don't like the way I'm publishing because I'm publishing in pieces. I'm not publishing a full story. However, if I had just said this is book one at 70K and this is book two at 70K, I would have avoided that entire problem. So it's a lot in just positioning and expectation. If you tell people this is the first book, that's what they'll expect. If it's long enough, if it's over 50K, if it's 70K, that's a normal sized book. You can charge $2.99 or $4.99. I have a friend who charges $2.99 even for shorter books. They're like 20 or 30K, and he does okay for his genre, but a lot of readers for a 20K book, they wouldn't be happy paying $2.99 for it because it would feel a little bit short. So I would shoot for 50 or 60K, especially in young adult. The average book is about 60K, so a lot of my friends write that, and that's just good enough, satisfying enough story. For me personally, the way that I plot my books, they tend to be longer, slower stories with a lot of plotting. So it takes me about my last one was 100,000 words. It takes me an average of 100,000 or 150,000 words to finish my story, and they're longer stories because of the way that I plot. So that's not exactly a personal preference, that's just the way that I'm doing things. I may start to break them up into smaller pieces because, like I said, ideally you would have the first book in a series perma-free or 99 cents to lead into the rest of the series so that they feel like they're getting a good deal and they're getting a high quality, a bulky book for a lower price so that they're hooked and they feel like they got a good deal, and then they're happy to pay for the rest of the book later. The flip side of that, however, is that having a longer book doesn't really mean they're going to be more satisfied. So it's very possible if you try to bulk it out, or I've had people ask me, I plotted this book out, but it's only 40K. I really want it to be 60K. I need to add 20,000 words, which I do. If you intentionally add more to the content, you can do that if you plot differently or if you fix the problems. Probably there's you can improve the story if you add more high quality scenes that enhance the plot. But if it's just fluff, that's going to be disadvantageous because the critical error is if you get readers to give up on your book. So if they are reading your book and you have a great actionable opening, but then there's too many slow pieces, or there's any scenes or chapters that aren't directly building the plot and moving the plot forward and introducing new information to help readers understand different parts of the characters of the story. If you have too much fluff and the book isn't going anywhere, people will stop reading. So it doesn't work to have a longer book if people stop reading. And that's why sometimes it's a lot better to have a shorter book, especially in like urban fantasy. It's a lot more action-based. It can be better to have a very short but very action-based book where there's a lot of stuff happening quickly and the plot is always kind of churning forward. A lot of big things are happening and developing rather than putting in a lot of slow pieces. I like to have a good mix of actionable scenes and then slow reflection scenes and actionable scenes. But if readers stop reading my story, and I have books that are slower than some readers like, some readers like my slower stories, some readers like my more actionable stories, but there's the danger of trying to focus too much on word count rather than the story. And if you just focus on word count and you try to build a bigger book, that can hurt you in the long run if readers don't finish. I've read a lot of books where I was just reading one recently, super long book. It was perma-free, but I almost gave up on it in the middle because there were parts of it that just felt like nothing was really happening. Several chapters, probably like 5 chapters, where I felt like it was tedious, it wasn't going anywhere. And then finally, there was a really big action scene that brought it all together, and all of those previous chapters were giving clues that built into what happened on that big scene. So it did all make sense and it was well plotted. But I think probably a really strong editor could have cut some stuff out and tightened up the plot a little bit to reduce the risk, because there's the risk of churn. If there's the risk of readers giving up too soon before they get to that pivotal scene that explains all the stuff that you're leading up to, that's going to hurt you. Readers will give up and they won't finish the story. So I always focus on plotting first, not the word count. I think you need to strongly plot a book or a story that's going to satisfy readers of your genre, and that's the most important thing. I don't think length is necessarily as important. For nonfiction, I think you can write 10 or 20,000 words and have a substantial nonfiction book as long as it's very focused on providing actionable, high quality content. I read one recently that was pretty short. It's probably about 10,000 words, but there were so many high quality pieces of content that I learned a lot from it, and I really felt like it taught me something. For nonfiction readers are less price sensitive, so they'll be happy paying $3.99 or $4.99 for a book that teaches them what they need to know and solves their problem. So don't worry so much about the length of the book. Just focus on giving them as much value. It's the same as fiction. You want to give them as much value as you can so that readers are happy with the price they paid, and that's where satisfaction comes from. If you don't give enough value, or the story isn't engaging enough to hold their attention, or the nonfiction book doesn't really teach them anything that they needed to know, it doesn't solve the promise that you offered when they bought the book, then they're not going to be satisfied with the story. So those are just some guidelines. Like I said, 70,000 for fiction. Generally for traditionally published general nonfiction, I think 60,000 to 80,000 words is fine. But if you're self-publishing for nonfiction and you're focused on little micro topics, which you totally can be, I think it's reasonable to have 10 or 15,000 words for a nonfiction book and still mostly have satisfied readers, as long as you're focusing on high quality content and actually helping people. If you're just focused on, trying to make money by pitching a book that has a hungry audience, you're not going to have satisfied readers. And if you don't have satisfied readers, you're not going to have good reviews, and your book isn't going to sell long term. So those are some guidelines. I think it's important to think about the word count, because you need to focus on, like, how much do I have to write to satisfy readers, or what do readers who read this genre expect? I have to make sure I conform with reader expectations. If you, like, the way to get negative book reviews is to have improperly managed reader expectations. So they're expecting one thing, and because of their expectations, they're disappointed with your book because they were surprised by what you did in your book or how long your book was. So that's a problem. Like in some of my books, I've been publishing not complete books, but like a perma-free sample that's the first 5 chapters, maybe 10,000 words. And I have to be very careful to say in the Amazon description, this is just a sample of the book. Even if it's a free book, readers will still be disappointed to get to the end, even if it's their fault, even if they didn't read the description and see that disclaimer that this is not a full book. I still have to, like I should put that even in the beginning of the book so that when they start reading, they know it's not a full thing. I'll get less conversion because a lot of readers don't want a sample, they want a full story. But it's better to get less conversion than to get a lot of really disappointed readers. Usually, probably, but I'll comment with the addition that if you really hook their attention, and like what I do, I hook their attention with those 10,000 words, I get them really invested in the story, and then I offer them the rest of the book for free to build my list. So I don't say, this is a free sample, but you have to buy the rest of the book. I say this is a free sample, and I will give you the book for free if you sign up on my list. So that way I get them on my list, they get the rest of the book for free, so they're pretty happy. They've gotten a lot of valuable content. They've got the first book for free, and then they've become fans, so they'll buy the other books in the series later on when those books are finished. So I hope this helps a little bit if you're thinking about writing either a fiction or nonfiction in terms of how many words your book should have.